Jason Costigan joins us. Costo, I don't want to just lurk on this too long, mate. But obviously it's happened, and obviously you've got a few thoughts about it as well.
Well, you can't sugarcoat it, Marty. Good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to your loyal listeners. And it's important to have this ventilated. And I think Jason Demetriou's comments post-match at the press conference at Penrith last night, how can you argue with what the South Sydney coach is saying? Like, when is enough enough? Like, when have people had a gutful of this stuff? Can you imagine if this was a Warriors game? Let's say the game was being played. Let's say the game was the Warriors playing at Penrith. It's a bigger story, obviously, in New Zealand, is it not? And in other parts of the Pacific. And,
yeah, for sure.
And this is not the first time we've had this stuff in our game. And look, rugby league's had a great story to tell, Marty. I don't want to gloss over this either. If people want to learn about our game, and I appreciate it's not the number one game in town where you are, but we've got a great tradition and great history of having players with dark skin climbing Mount Everest of rugby league and captaining their nation and doing stuff on the world stage. Arthur Beetson, we spoke about him recently, didn't we? He was the first Indigenous Australian to captain an Australian sporting team, and that's something that I know Yvonne Goolagong, of course, an icon of tennis, proud Wiradjuri woman. And you won't get many white fellas talking like I'm talking to you right now, to be honest. I'm actually in Wiradjuri country right now, which is in southern New South Wales. They had a great rapport with one another because they were trailblazers in their chosen sports for their people and for their race. And, I've got an Indigenous auntie, Marty. She was born under the pandanus palm in Arnhem Land, up in the Never Never in the Northern Territory. She's 17.
Aaron, just give that to us again, Jace. Just give that to that phrase there. Give me that again. She's born under the palm in the Never Never. Do that again.
Well, she was born under a pandanus palm. Legend has it up in the Never Never.
That's beautiful.
Up in
That is beautiful,
up
mate.
Up in Arnhem Land, which is in the Northern Territory. And her cousin and I, her cousin. Her dad was a white fella, like my mum's brother, and but her mum's a beautiful lady. I've had the pleasure of accompanying a number of times over the years. She adored my mother when my mum came up for the funeral for her brother. In a church where there was no electricity, you could hear the termites eating the church a couple of hours south of Darwin. And, how would I explain what happened at Penrith to my Indigenous brothers and sisters in the Northern Territory? They don't even follow rugby league, Marty. In all honesty, AFL is the religion up there. It really is. And I learned that when I went up there with the Catholic Church many years ago, when I stayed on one of the Aboriginal missions for 2 weeks. I'm probably a bit more multidimensional to most people who followed my career as a broadcaster. I'm very proudly the game's most multicultural or culturally diverse broadcaster. My father came out on a boat from Italy in 1964. I have Albanian sisters, Maltese sisters. My stepfather was Maltese. My current stepmother, she's still with us, God bless her, and my father. She's North Macedonian, so I come from a very diverse background. I've got 24 first cousins out of 28 that live in Europe, from Istanbul basically through to Berlin. So, I'm not probably your classic Pakia boy. So I'm going to call it out, and I reckon the NRL needed to come down hard on this morning, and there seems to be a bit of pussyfooting around. I'm happy to give people the benefit of doubt as they go about their investigative work, but they've got people in there with the integrity unit and plenty of other people that are eminently qualified. They should be doing everything they can to basically eliminate this stuff. And, perhaps it was just the one person, as I understand, but that's one too many, and it needs to be called out. And I can only endorse the comments from the South Sydney coach last night, himself from a very ethnically diverse background, in saying this racism rot, it's got to stop.
Yeah, it's got to stop,
and
mate.
I support the calls to have the first person identified and have them banned from coming to the NRL forever and ever.
There's only two little things I'll say about this, and then we'll move on to the games. We won't have time today to do all the games, so I'm going to pick a couple there, about 3 or 4 that we're going to talk about. But is that whenever this happens, I feel, as I said right at the start, I feel a hell of a lot more sad than I feel any other emotion. But there are 2 things I hope that come from it. One, I love the overwhelming reaction from everybody, which is this is just wrong in every single aspect. And I hope that every time this does happen, and I hope it never happens, Jason, obviously, but I hope that every time it does happen, we're one step closer to it never happening, if you understand what I mean.
Well, for sure, and I'll just sum it up by saying next weekend, Marty, we've got the multicultural round of the NRL.
Okay,
no, it's not
right.
the Indigenous round, but I hope this debacle last night, this disgraceful situation, doesn't overshadow that. Because it's we're a game for all people from far and wide, and I've called the game in 10 countries, and the diversity of our game shows no signs of abating, and the contribution of our Indigenous brothers and sisters has been significant, to say the least, particularly with the elite level of the game, with State of Origin and the Kangaroos, and on it goes. And last night was disgraceful, and I'm glad that Demetrio called it out.
4 games we're going to talk about then, because we've got about 10 minutes to go. Okay, and these are Eels, Sharks, Broncos, Cowboys, Roosters, Warriors, Dolphins, Raiders. The other 3 will leave. They're probably a little bit more easy to figure out.
Well, how about we just go through them quickly, one by one?
Eels, Sharks, mate. Who you got and why?
I think without Nico Hines, Cronulla are a different side, and I think Parramatta, they'll be smarting, and so I think Parramatta will get them. I think Cronulla without Hines, I'm not convinced that they're the real deal. They went out in straight sets last year with Nico Hines. He's the best player in the game. He ain't playing. I'm on Parramatta.
Okay, Broncos, Cowboys. This is Lachlan's lot, mate, up against the Northern lads with the cowboy hats and the boots and the swag, and they came down, they've dicked them 3 times out of 4 at that stadium, Jason.
Well, that don't matter where they play this game. They could play the game on Mars, but basically Queensland is just consumed with this game and has been since 1995 when little brother was born. And I was there to witness history, and, we were easily beaten up. They used to beat up on us. It was like the big kid in the playground beating up on the little kid. And the little kid in the end, guess what, Marty? He got bigger and he got better and he got stronger and he got faster.
Come here, Lachlan, with that big nose of yours. We're going to punch it, mate. That's what he said.
Well, look, Carrigan basically cementing his future with the Brisbane as a fillip for the Broncos coming into the game. But I think the Cowboys are capable, I've said at the start, to make the grand final. I think they will make the grand final, and I think they'll beat Brisbane.
Roosters, Warriors, be careful how you tread here. I know. Look, I don't want to play a wounded Roosters side, mate. I know you. I know you gave us the tip last week. You tipped the Warriors, so I'm stepping back here. It's all yours. Go.
Marty, you say, careful where I tread. It's almost as if you're a tour guide up in Kakadu. There's no crocodiles on your show. My job is to call it as I see it. And I'm sorry, but the Warriors, guess what? The Dolphins have done the Warriors no favours whatsoever. No. And I think, and I'm going to tell you now, if the Roosters don't put 40 on the Warriors, I'll be shocked.
Oh, come on, man. We're going to rewind the tape on that. I'm going to give you a second go on that, mate, because otherwise this is coming back to haunt you. Costo's Corner, Jason Costigan, legendary caller for the Warriors for 10 years. You called the Warriors for 10 years. Take it back.
All right, I'll tip the Roosters by 42.
It's such a tough game, mate. And as you say, a wounded Roosters side. I mean, they're not... Jason, I was amazed. Let's talk about the Dolphins Raiders, but I was amazed. 12-6, the Roosters were up. The Dolphins just tore them after that last week.
Well, I was eating humble pie. I actually got to ring up Jenny Craig after that.
Dolphins Raiders then, mate. After that performance, you've got to go back-to-back with them, don't you?
I'm not convinced. I'm not saying it was a flash in the pan, but if they have a couple of injuries, they're going to have some problems. Look, with the Canberra Raiders, they've had some injuries with Xavier Savage, most notably. He's an unbelievable player. That's why Nickel Kluckster is in your part of the world again, and I think he'll be. What I saw last week, he's a shining light. So if the Warriors are to spring an upset, he's key man this weekend and every week for that matter. But I don't think the Dolphins can back it up. No, and I think Canberra. Ricky Stewart, he'd be livid with what he saw last week, and the preseason form was average, but I think Canberra can win just.
Do you think the Dolphins took them? Sorry, the Roosters took them way too easy. Then they're 12-6 up, and all of a sudden.
Look, I don't know if they took them too easy, but look, the chant went up. I don't know if you watched the game closely,
watched the game,
but they were chanting Redcliffe, Redcliffe, Redcliffe. I don't know if the commentators even understand the significance of Redcliffe in the competition going back 75 years. And, they actually helped build their leagues club, their licensed club, Marty, because Arthur Beetson went to Sydney, and because of poker machine money,
that's right.
It came back to Redcliffe. And they expanded their club. It's been a Cinderella story on and off the field. I'm so happy for the game that we've got a second team in Brisbane after all these years. I don't call it real expansion, but it's certainly a feel-good story for rugby league, but I don't think they can back it up in week 2.
Costo's Corner. I just want to go back quickly to last night's game, Panthers versus Rabbitohs. What did you make of that Panthers performance?
Well, there's a crack in the windscreen at Penrith.
There you go.
It looks like but they've actually got some araldite out during the week. Ivan Cleary's been into his local Mitre 10 or Bunnings and fixed up the windscreen, because obviously Latrell Mitchell, he thought the windscreen was completely shattered. I thought it was a missed opportunity for South Sydney last night. I think that Penrith, they are nothing. I'll say it again. They are nothing on the team that won back-to-back premierships. I know they was close, very close to winning the World Club Challenge. They lost a couple of games by 1 point, but without Kick-Out, without Uppy Coruscant, they're a different mob, and I don't expect them to be in the grand final. I didn't tip them for the grand final. I did get burnt last night, Marty. I tipped the Bunnies, but I'm happy to wear that. They weren't too far off, and they gave them too much of a head start away from home.
There's West Tigers Knights, mate. I mean, these two teams are going to be cellar dwellers, aren't they? Tell me that one of these two teams could possibly make even the top 10.
Well, I don't think either team will make the top 8 or maybe the top 10. That's a different thing. But guess what? You make the top 10, you get a donut, or what do you don't? You get, mate. We live in a world where everyone gets a prize.
Everyone gets a prize, mate. Yeah.
But West Tigers, there's been some drama there in relation to John Bateman. Like, where is he? Why wasn't he out here earlier? How come he's not being picked? How come Coruscant didn't start? There's a lot of news coming out of West Tigers. Don't forget, they finished with the wooden spoon last year. I don't think they're going to finish with the spoon this year. I told you and your listeners before, I expect Newcastle to finish with the wooden spoon, and I'm expecting the Tigers to win this game. I think they'll win it well. I think the Tigers will win 13 plus to shut a few people up, and they need to do it because the noise is starting to make people a little bit cranky there at Concord. So I think the Tigers, and I expect a big game from Coruscant this week.
All right, you also tipped the Dogs, mate, and you tipped them hard. You said that this team is coming 6th or 7th, I think it was, and then what happens? They get absolutely belted, and all right, now they've got to go and play in Melbourne, mate, so they're going to be 0-2.
Yeah, they will be. And, they got blown off the park, didn't they, by Manly first up. And, the Eagles, were rocking there, and Daddy Cool was in fine form, so to speak, at least on the PA system.
Go on.
But, they're coming to Melbourne. So, Melbourne, of course, have had turnover of staff, those key forwards in terms of the Bromwiches, B1 and B2, if I can be so colourful. There's no cheese there. If you want cheese in Melbourne, you need to go and get something from the craft factory. But the fact of the matter is the Bulldogs, they are a work in progress, and Serraldo is looking for improvement each week. I don't think you're going to see much improvement away in this game. I think Melbourne are a safe bet. That's the easiest game of the round to pick, surely. Okay,
well, I thought the Dragons and the Titans was just about as easy as well, because I'm tipping the Dragons to be winless this year. 0-24, mate. That's what I'm hoping for from them. Titans surely in that one. Go on, that'd be great, mate. I hate the Dragons, mate.
Well, I thought the Gold Coast were terrific, in shutting up everybody at Leichhardt. At the 8th wonder of the world, Leichhardt Oval, first up against a Tigers team that had been basically written off, finished in the bottom of the pile last year. I think they did well last week, the Gold Coast. But you know what, St George Illawarra, it's their first game for the season. They don't have Jack de Belin. He has a calf problem. He's an experienced player. Obviously, Jack de Belin at the back of the scrum or in the back row. That he's a big out for St George Illawarra. Look, I'm not convinced about St George Illawarra winning this game. I'm really not. Toss of a coin. You want to check my tips on Twitter at Costo Jason. Look, St George Illawarra, they're undefeated at the moment, hey, but I'm being sarcastic. They had the bye first up.
Yes,
it's a toss of a coin. It's a toss of a coin, this one.
All right, mate. Just on, we've got a minute or so to go. Free. What do you think about these? These cobbled together sides, St George and Illawarra, and then I hated losing North Sydney as well. I was a Balmain fan, and when Balmain joined Westside, I patched over to the Warriors, mate, because I couldn't stand it.
Marty, look, we could talk about this for hours. I actually caught up with respected rugby league journalist Steve Mascord, good friend of mine.
Great dude, mate. He's just been over here. He's been brilliant, yeah.
Yeah, I know he was over there, and a great internationalist promoting his book too, Two Tribes. Google it if you haven't heard about it. Two Tribes. It's basically about the big split in the game going back to 1997, thanks to Rupert Murdoch and Kerry Packer and what was known as the Super League War. Yeah. I had the pleasure of actually being at North Sydney for a similar launch a few weeks ago for the book, and it's a great read, and there's lots of anecdotes there, great stories from different people from the past. Look, it's fair to say clubs like North Sydney, had they signed with Uncle Rupert, and I say that as someone who was a creation of News Corp, started my career with News Corp, had North Sydney signed with News Corp or Super League, they probably would be still in the competition today, but they didn't. And nor did the Illawarra Steelers. And to be blunt, there's been a bit of drama before the season started with the name of St George Illawarra. Personally, I think they should go with Illawarra Dragons and play all their games in Wollongong and get out of the congested Sydney market. But to keep playing with the red V, obviously, because at the end of the day, that was a big debate about how many teams can Sydney sustain. We've gone from a Sydney competition from 1908 through to the 1980s and 90s, and the world's moved on. Look, we have a different model to AFL, Marty. We could talk about this for hours, because the AFL, most of their games in Melbourne are played at two venues, the Docklands and the MCG. We still have this love affair with the boutique grounds in suburbia, whether it's Leichhardt, Penrith, Brookvale, Campbelltown. What about the people in Campbelltown? I don't think they're seeing their West Tigers for the first 2 months in the competition. So, there's some parts of Australia that don't get to see their heroes up close and personal. We never saw our heroes like that in North Queensland because we didn't have our own team in the big time. Now we do. But people in places like Campbelltown, they only see their team, 4 or 5 times a year.
Yeah.
The competition's not right, but with Gold Coast coming back into the comp years ago, and then the NRL dilly-dallying over expansion and finally saying, you know what, we'll have a second Brisbane team. Now we have an odd number. I can tell you now, Marty, just summing up and finalising our discussion today, now where the debate will be is where's Team 18 coming from? Is it coming from Perth, or is there a second team coming out of New Zealand? And if New Zealand is a fair income about rugby league, the sport for all people that's inclusive, where it's not just for rich kids in posh suburbs, and that's a bit controversial saying that on your program, but I don't mind pushing the envelope. I just said it then, and I'll say it again. It's a game for all people, rugby league, and we need to expand the competition, and I think Perth and a second Kiwi team should be on the agenda as we go back towards a 20-team model at some point in the 2020s if we're fair dinkum about growing the game.